out with your psychiatrist. This was our relationship while we made the film. She was very much of a diva. And this was a very low-budget film where divas really did not belong. And, I always felt kind of this necessity to protect Michael from her and to make it all kind of work. So that was the story of my relationship with Trish Vanderbilt.
I wish you were here so she could defend herself. I mean, she really was difficult. And the way she is, this film wouldn't have happened. We couldn't have done it if she hadn't been. She is, as I think you can see on the screen, that there's something very solid about her that didn't get infected, because certainly the cameraman was a very close old friend of mine. One day I had to, for the umpteenth time, apologize to Trish for the way she acted, the way she acted destructively. And as we walked out of the house, the cameraman, whom I had taken along to support me, really, and to tell her how wonderful she looked. And I mean, she was a poor woman, I mean, she won't let you at that part of her that was damaged, She wouldn't let you near them. She had it completely pulled off. But as a result, one couldn't really speak to her. One just had to hope. The cameraman said, that's why I can't be a director, because he could see what I had to do to keep her with us, And one day Brooke said to me, I don't know whether you remember this, he said, Mike, if I had been as hard, if I were as difficult as she, we wouldn't be shooting. And that was true. I mean, Brooke was wonderful. Really. Never raised your voice, except in the scene. And that was one day she was nice to you. That's what happened. You could see it. She was undermining her. It's awful to say these things when we're doing this in theater different. It isn't right, really.
But that's in the story itself, though. I mean, so you...
Yeah, but I shouldn't be saying.
But can you speak to this idea that just the principle of doubling and of reflection and the two houses, the two families? Where did this idea come from, Michael? What was the source for this notion?
I never thought about it that way. I mean, I think you go from moment to moment, and you don't actually. I thought she was going to die.
Me too.
Well, when you were writing the script.
Yeah. I mean, if you know the story, it's not a right story. I didn't know the story when I was working on it. It took 1.5 years to write that film. And I didn't know. I thought she was going to die. And when the evidence sort of gathered, and I realized she wasn't going to die, I thought it was wrong. And then I said, okay, that's where the evidence is going. I feel very often that I work more like a scientist, and that I just collect evidence, and if the evidence tells me to go somewhere, that's where I go. I didn't really plan anything, You just gather facts, and then I learned that from making documentary films. I honestly feel that if it isn't like a document, it isn't true. Brecht, of all people, said porn is a document. And I think he meant it, and I feel that feel that power. The poem is a document. It's not a poem, it's a document. And I mean, the things that bother me about the film are the things that don't feel quite factual enough, I think we just went from fact to fact to fact, and that this doubling came, it wasn't planned. It just evolved out of the I hope that makes sense.
So it emerged in the writing process
It
itself.
wasn't planned, there was no scheme, but I think there's a great deal of this kind of doubling in life. I mean, we keep repeating ourselves.
That's what my husband said when I said to him, well, what did you think about the repetitions of things? He said, that's like life. Yeah.
And her husband is a very good actor. So.
I was just going to say, I think the same thing. I've been fortunate enough as the distributor of the film to be with Michael and Brooke quite often when we've shown the film to audiences, and I feel like what I've always noticed, first, everyone responds to Brooke's performance and they see something in it that feels very true to life, perhaps the confusion of the character, and it always seemed to me, when I've spoken to audiences, is that there's an expectation in a film that things will be resolved, not just for the premise, but in a way that the audience is used to aesthetically. That there's a scene and the scene ends, and there's a moment of drama, and that issue is then resolved, and we move on to the next one. But it seems to me that throughout the film, just when you think it's reached a peak, or it's reached a moment, then there's the additional. There's a confrontation, but then there's at the end, on the island, but then there's a coda, where we're outside the institution before she goes in. And that seems to be very true to life. It's the idea that just the way that we expect as audiences drama to be resolved isn't. And I think that's very, very unique to Michael's work. And it takes a kind of very special person to be able to perform it. And that's why I think people respond to the film so much. I'm speaking just anecdotally.
I mean, yeah, Michael, this idea of avoiding any kind of, let's say, more expected closure and resolution, is that something that, how did you develop this kind of energy of the film where, Trish is just, there's this constant, like, coming back and leaving, and coming back and leaving, come in, and it builds to this, like, just almost fever pitch intensity. I mean, well, let's just talk about it in terms of the production, Brooke. I mean, in terms of, is this a kind of energy and intensity that you felt during the production itself? I mean, what was the experience of, really, like, living this story sort of in front of the camera?
I have to plead forgetfulness, to be honest. It was a long time ago, and I remember really having a good time doing it. So it was, it was intense the way filmmaking is always intense.
I mean, I wanted to ask about, like, the use of the houses themselves. I mean, in your writing, Michael, you make this wonderful point that the word plot is both an actual spatial term. You use, like, a plot of land, but it's actually the story itself. And you speak about the spatialization of narrative. And I was wondering if you could talk about the ways in which you sort of cast the houses, and because the houses play such an important role. There's a sense that as somebody's moving out, someone's moving in, as the house is emptied, it becomes, in a way, a safer place for others to be in. So I was wondering if you could talk about the role of the house, and also how you cast the houses, if you will, because they act almost like characters at times.
Well, I think that the thing that was important to, I don't want to say me, but I guess I should say, was that it just happens to someone. I mean, there's no, life, suddenly you're in another world, suddenly you're back in the past, suddenly you're in somebody else's life. That it was important to me that there was no one pushing her into that other house, you know, that she walks outside on the porch and this little girl comes into her life. And everything happens that way. It's all accidental, except then it makes an awful sense, you know. And it's a bit of a fairy tale that Brooke can come out of it and smile, you know. I mean, life isn't always that happy. Oddly enough, I think it's a fairy tale. I mean, to me, fairy tales are very real, and so this is a real fairy tale, you know. I mean, life doesn't resolve that well, I don't think, usually. Maybe you have to go through 3 or 4 episodes like that where you get visited by the past like a bad dream, you know, and then you finally wake up and say, you know, that's who I am. That's me now. I know what this is about, you know. And I think that's what the end is about to me, you know. It always looks so happy to me.
Michael, you once described to me that the ending, that perhaps Brooke's expression was one of relief. That you had said to me once that you thought perhaps Brooke's expression was one of relief, in that she just dodged a bullet. This person did not die, who very easily could have died. And I wonder, did you guys have both in the 2 shots on the plane that bookend the film, did you have discussions about what might be going on in your... Nothing, just let the camera...
No, we didn't have to. Brooke knew what to do, and I was always amazed. I didn't know Brooke. I didn't know anything about her, really. I'd seen her in Days of Heaven, and I always had been struck by her face, but I didn't know you. And then suddenly, there you were doing that scene with the mother, with your foster mother or adopted mother. And it was so beautiful, that scene. You did it so beautifully. And I said, I wonder where she came from on that. It wasn't but I think we just went from moment to moment, making each moment as real as possible. That's all you do. It's like making a brick house or something. You put down one brick and you put down another brick and another brick. And sometimes you don't like the brick, you know, or it doesn't fit, but that's how we work. It's very concrete. You go from here to there, and this is what you say, and if what you say feels right, then it's right, you know. And really, there's nothing planned or schemed, you know. Afterwards, it looks schemed, but it isn't schemed. I honestly think if one isn't surprised by what happens before it happens, then it's got to be wrong, you know. Nothing, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 minutes. I don't think all of us do. I mean, we know that the bomb could drop on us. I know we don't think so, and otherwise we couldn't live, but it could happen. And you know it could. It's in the newspapers.
Well, Mike, I mean, when I see the film, there's a scene that always surprises me, and just thinking about this element, and that's where Steve, the lawyer husband, pulls out that pair of scissors and starts cutting at the hair. And I was wondering, that sort of visual imagination, that sort of violence, like the speed of the car, the scissors, things like that, then, I mean, is that what you're referring to as a...
That was very concrete. I mean, there was a scissor in her pocketbook. Did you get that? Mm-hmm. There was something sharp in his when he put his hand in your pocketbook. He hurt his finger. And so he knew there was a scissor there. And that's why I always worried that wasn't strong enough, that he happened on the scissor. He didn't know there was a scissor. He happened on it, and that's how the hair cutting came about. It wasn't like, I'm going to cut her hair. It's that he hurt himself, and he was so enraged that he then used what came to hand. You know. Did you see this? Did you feel the scissor that he heard
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And some of you, perhaps not everybody, but it wasn't quite clear, you know, it wasn't quite, but you can't do that scene twice. It was pretty hard, and you were really upset. I love the scene when you look in the mirror and see your hair. I always love that moment.
When she's sad.
She did all those things beautifully. I mean, and I always love that scene when the choir is singing and the little girl looks at you and smiles at you while she's singing, and you smile back. Those are wonderful moments.
Brooke, what are your best memories of making this film?
My best memories? Oh, God, I mean, it's terrible to say, but my memory is not that great. And, we were put up in an incredibly beautiful house that I loved being in, and I love to work. I love to act. So it was just, you know, the idea that we were making this thing, and that's always exciting, you know.
Well, what does it mean to see it now? I mean, what did you, when you saw the film again, what surprised you?
Everything, because I didn't remember it. My husband at one point said, "Does she die?" Jackie, and I said, "I don't remember." So, yeah, it's vague.
That's vivid. And for you, Michael, I mean, you hadn't seen the film for a long time until, I know Jake persuaded you to actually allow this film to be released for the first time theatrically. What surprised you, or what, seeing it for the first time when you did now months ago on the big screen, what struck you?
Well, I mean, the problem with my films is that nobody liked them when they were made. Even the first film, the film called Nothing But a Man, it took 20 years for people to see it. The Plot Against Harry, who was a disaster. Nobody wanted to show it. The crew and the cast were very disheartened by it. I thought I had failed completely. Then I went into a pretty big depression, and I came out of it, and I started telling a different kind of story, and of which this is the second. The first one, well, there was a man, I sent it to a man in California, and he was very well connected to the industry, but he was not a filmmaker. But he was the son of a very well-known filmmaker, the grandson of the studio head. And he loved the script. He wanted to make it. And he sent it to some production company, and they sent it right back and said, "I'm crazy." So that was the end of that. And this was the next script. And I took it to public television, who was doing am I going into too much detail?
This is great. This is great.
I took it to the head of production for that project, and she said, "You don't know how to write a script." And I was very angry, and I mean, she really hated it. And so I went home, and I wrote another script. I started that afternoon. I mean, you know, rage is not a poor source of energy. I wrote another script for 4 people. And I said, nobody's going to stop from making this film. And all of you, any of you who want to see it, it's going to be seen here tomorrow.
This is Pilgrim Farewell.
It's not an easy film to watch. Are you going to hear
I
it?
can't talk about it.
Anyway, I think that it's okay, but
It's better than
it's
okay.
hard to watch. Some of it. It's really a little bit harder than this one. And then I just kept writing films, and after, the plot, this film and the next film, the one tomorrow, were the last films I was able to get any money for, because they just didn't work for people, you know. And for some reason, the audience catches up with these films. I mean, you can't believe nobody responded the way people do today to this film. Nobody did. People just didn't like it. Nobody laughed at the plot against Harry. I don't understand it completely myself. I mean, you know, you don't think you're ahead of everybody because you're not. It's just that the medium changes. And people get, I don't know, get more perceptive about certain things. You can't believe that the Times dismissed those films totally. I mean, they didn't even.
Do people, you've already shown the plot against Harry?
Yes,
So
we showed it.
people were here for it? It's like
Yeah, there you go. Look at that.
one of the great movies ever made.
Truly, Michael.
I think the plot against Harry is a nice film. I love that.
Oh, it's an extraordinary film, and you know, Michael, it's very much the case that oftentimes works of art are ahead of their time, and that it takes a while to find their audience, and the audience is here tonight. And I believe the audience probably has some questions and comments to share. So if you have, please raise your hand. We have microphones on either side. Start with the gentleman in the back.
First of all, really thank you for this opportunity. It was an amazing film. Oh, sorry.